in 3, 2, 1, go.
Hello, welcome to Glasgow 2024's Wheel of Time fandom event. I'm David Green, and with me I have some of my favourite people from the Wheel of Time fandom. Before I get everyone introduce themselves, I will go over the kind of house rules for today's event, and then we'll get straight into it because we've got a lot of really exciting Wheel of Time things to talk about. I expect everyone who's watching on YouTube or in the webinar are Wheel of Time fans. If not, you're going to learn a lot of things and probably get spoiled for the entire series at some point as well. So just up front,
try not to.
No, just brutal spoilers all the way through. That's what's going to happen. So anyone who's in with us in the webinar on Zoom, there is a Q&A function where you can pop any questions that you have in there as well, and we will get to them throughout the event. And there's also there's a chat function as well where you can all chat amongst yourselves too. But please follow the code of conduct, which I'll go over in a second. Everyone on YouTube, you can comment away in there as well. These will be brought into the Zoom session from our tech, who is Pam. Thank you very much, Pam. And if you are live tweeting about this, please use the hashtag Glasgow 2024 hashtag as well, just so people can see us, as well as all the other ones like Twitter of Time and whatever else. Just with the comments and everything that's going on, we have a zero tolerance policy on racism, anti-Semitism, Islamophobia, homophobia, transphobia. Anyone behaving inappropriately will be removed. It's one strike and you're out. There's no zero tolerance. So that is that at the start. So with me, if we start with WoT, if you want to introduce yourself and tell everyone watching a little bit about you and your part of the fandom.
I'm John. I run a Wheel of Time YouTube channel called What Up, and I deal mainly in news, leaks, and rumors, heavy on the leaks and the rumors. I started it almost 3 years ago, Matt. I don't know. It was just after
more than 3 years ago. It's a little bit more.
We all started
more than
around
3
the
years
same
ago.
time.
We all pretty much started at the same time. I think it was. I started in October of 2019 is when I started. Yeah, and at the time when I started, I thought, hey, I don't think there's anyone else out there that likes the Wheel of Time, so I want to talk to people about it. So I started a YouTube channel, and then I realized very quickly that no. I was very wrong. If you want to know about the show, if you want to know about news and rumors and leaks and things like that, things that other channels don't touch, I talk about a lot of those things on my channel.
Excellent. And just a couple of little kind of icebreaker questions. What is your? I know everyone knows who your favorite character is, but obviously, I think you're gonna reveal it in triumphant ways that you usually do because you have it marked on everybody. But yeah, who is your favorite character, and what would you say would be your favorite Wheel of Time book?
So favorite character, Gowan. I have his name tattooed on me, of course. Gowan Tricant. Not many people like him, unfortunately. I don't know why. Favorite Wheel of Time book probably would be Lord of Chaos. Right now, it changes every time I read the series. It changes month to month, but right now, I think Lord of Chaos is probably my favorite because I just finished it not long ago.
That's mine as well. Which I rarely hear people say Lord of Chaos. So that's fun. Gawain is not my favorite character though. Far from it. Rebecca, over to you. What is your? Tell us a little bit about yourself and your part of the fandom.
Yeah. So I'm Rebecca. It used to be really simple to explain like what I did in the fandom, and now it's gotten really complicated because I do like 12 different things, but I'm exaggerating slightly. But I started in the Wheel of Time fandom like around the same time as John, around the same time as the Dusty Wheel started. But I think it was like September 2019 for me. I started my YouTube channel, Reading the Pattern. And at the time I was doing a lot of rereading the books and like doing like a whole series of like breaking it down, rereading it. But I've done a lot with the TV show, and I really like talking about it as an adaptation, like how to approach TV shows that are adaptations. So that's kind of just a particular interest of mine. How do you adapt this massive series and make it into something that's coherent in a different story form? So that's that. But I do a lot of other things in the fandom now. It's gotten a little ridiculous. Like I do things with Dragon Mount, social media. I'm on another YouTube channel called WoT the Adaptation. planning conventions and all kinds of stuff. So I need to cool it anyway.
And because you didn't have enough things to do, you also started doing some Rings of Power things as well.
Yeah, I did some of that on my channel too, because I again, it's just fun talking about it like as an adaptation. It was a different kind of thing, and I enjoyed it. So
yeah, me too. So what is your what would be your favorite character and book?
Okay, right. So if I'm meanly forced to pick a favorite character, I will pick Nynaeve as my favorite. But that's mean to make people choose. I'm just saying. I don't know. I'm having even harder time with books though, partly because there is a little bit in the middle where things start to blend a little bit, but I am just starting a reread of The Shadow Rising. That's definitely one of my favorites. So I know that's a lot of people's favorites. Also, Knife of Dreams, Gathering Storm. Like, it's mean to make me pick again.
So name them all.
Yeah, I'm just gonna name them all.
It's why
all 32 books.
Yeah, it's like, why did you not name this one? You left that one out.
Yeah, I know. It's because I hate that one. I'm just kidding.
Yeah. No, I like Knife of Dreams a lot. It always makes me really happy that Knife of Dreams was so good. Seeing as
it was really good.
Robert Jordan's last one, it was it's great. Chris Charlie in the chat asked, what's this tolerance policy on track and hate? So we will see going forward.
Gonna have to fight John. Yeah.
Ask the mods.
That's right.
Ask the mods in chat. They might not know what Trakan hate is.
Yeah. Matt, we'll go to you with your history with Wheel of Time, which it goes back because mainly we've talked about this before. When I first started seeing that there was things on the internet about the Wheel of Time in the late 90s, that was basically you.
I feel like you just aged me. Thanks a lot. I started reading the books when I was 15. There we go. I'll give you my age. Back when World was released, and got on the internet and quickly found out that the things I loved about the books, other people loved too, which had to do with theorizing and speculating. And so I made a website, because that's what you did back in the day, called Theoryland, and it gained a lot of notoriety. I don't know. Popularity is maybe a word, but definitely notoriety for being just a bunch of geeks that like to go into the nuance of all the mysteries of the books. We didn't really cosplay. We didn't do much other than argue about who was right about their particular theory for decades at this point. So and Theoryland led me to getting to know Brandon, just the awareness of the website, and Brandon asked a couple fans to jump in and be part of the beta read. So I got the huge honor to beta read the last 2 books of the Wheel of Time as part of that, and ended up in the books as a character. That character is an innkeeper that runs an inn. And when the TV show came back around, a good friend of mine reached out and said, what are you going to do? Are you going to do more website stuff? And instead, my son and I decided to create a YouTube channel called The Dusty Wheel Inn, which is the name of the inn in Towers of Midnight, where you'll find me as a character. We thought that was a fun meta thing to do, where I'm cosplaying as an innkeeper in real life that was myself, based off of me making a website that was put into a book. And that's basically The Dusty Wheel is a live call-in talk show. We talk about the Wheel of Time, we talk about the show, we do deep dives like we did yesterday into mysterious characters, and basically it's just my place to, as I said, find other fans who just want to talk about the Wheel of Time. And we cover the important news and rumors that appeal. Not all of them. All the stuff John says isn't that important, but some of them are, and those are the ones we cover.
And obviously, I think people that are familiar with the Dusty Wheel will know who your favorite character is.
Baron. Baron is my favorite character today. Baron is my favorite character.
Today.
Today. And Crossroads of Twilight, my favorite book. No, I'm just kidding. The Shadow Rising, just because of how much it touches on kind of, Jordan got really good at really innovating on kind of how his metaphysics work. And so The Shadow Rising is a good demonstration of that. And that's where I really started digging into the mystery side and the kind of how this world was put together side that I ended up loving a lot. So Shadow Rising, and if I had to tell you my actual favorite character is Lanfear.
Lanfear.
Yeah.
Well, it's you're quite famous for that now, I think, isn't it? It's just and there's lots of memes as well about it, which always pleases me whenever I see them popping up on Twitter.
Yeah.
I love seeing your face on Lanfear's body. It's always a treat.
Yeah, I bet.
Manfear, I think it is, isn't it? The hashtag. So we have a lot of people in the chat kind of talking about the favorites. There's a lot of love for the Shadow Rising, obviously. Quite a lot for Fires of Heaven and Laws of Chaos as well, which is the real kind of meat of the series. I think, when you get really kind of as you were saying, Mike, you really kind of sink into it. So the first kind of question that I have is based around how many. One of the famous things about the Wheel of Time fandom is that the rereads, the multiple rereads, the arguments with good-natured arguments with other fans through websites and everything about theories and everything like that. So I just wanted to know, and we can just open up. There's no kind of real order. We can have just a chat about it. Like, how many times have you all reread the series, and what is it about it that kind of brings people coming back time and time again, instead of delving into their TBR pile of all these new books that they buy all the time and just go, you know what, I think I need to go back and start The Eye of the World again and start this journey. What is it about the Wheel of Time?
Shame us, John. Shame us with as many times as you've read the series. Go ahead.
I'm on 78 right now.
By the way, when I first got to know John, he was like on 58 or something.
I was going to
So
say
3 years ago, yeah.
in the 3
has
years
increased significantly since I've known you. Oh my god.
Yes.
But you're such a geek.
I don't read much else. Let's put it that way. I do read some things occasionally, like cereal boxes and stuff, but mostly just the Wheel of Time.
See, I thought when I met John, I thought when I met John, I was like, I'm around 20. I was like, that's quite a lot. And then John was like, yeah, 58. And I was like, wow.
Yeah, I read it multiple times per year, multiple times per year. It's a comfort thing. My job takes me away from my family a lot. My job's pretty high stress. My life is high stress. So I grew up in, and I think Rebecca and Matt have heard the story. You've probably heard it as well, David, but I grew up in not so great of a household, not so great of a childhood. And my role models were people from the books. My family were people from the books. And that's where that comfort lies. Is that so? I go back and read it again, and it's like going home every time I read it. It's comforting and it's nice. So anytime something isn't exactly perfect in my life, I'm like, oh, I'm going to read the Wheel of Time. It makes me feel better. So that's part of the reason why I've read it so many times, I think.
I like to think that it is. I think it's the sheer amount of content that's there. And then it is the number of names. If this makes sense, I don't know if you've ever met somebody and you're like, wow, I really like that. It's nice to meet you. And they're like, we've met before. And you're like, really? This feels like the first time we've met. There's a lot of that in 14 books, right? There's a lot of that in the way that Jordan wrote this. There's things you focus on as you age. And so I think a lot of the fandom continuing to reread these things has a lot to do with the fact that you read them and you're like, did I remember this from my last time? Because this is really cool, or I'm really interested in this. And if you went back 7 years, you had that same epiphany, but you just can't remember any longer. So it's that the inability for us to hold everything in our minds that Jordan is trying to give us or presents us. And it feels like meeting new people or having new epiphanies. And in often many cases, it is because it's a new epiphany, because Jordan has written such a layered, dense series when it comes to, look at Origins of the Wheel of Time, right? Showing you how Jordan pieced things together. Something always seems like somehow new each time you go through. And that's, I think, one of the secrets of the way Jordan did this.
Yeah, I'm just to add to that. I don't know a number. I know, like, when I first started reading, like, Knife of Dreams was out, so I read straight through to Knife of Dreams and then read New Spring. And then I reread it, before, like, the other books came out. And I think each time I reread it. And I've done at least partial rereads since, but I don't have a count. But I think adding to what Matt's saying, yeah, it's that you're always going to be picking up on new things. There's so much there. that you can't possibly take it all in. And
Yeah.
the other thing I'll say is that, with time, there's so many characters, and you may relate differently to the characters depending on where you're at in your life and your age. Like, I know I relate to Maureen a lot more now than when I very first, read the series when I think I was 24 when I started reading. So, just a little bit younger than Maureen, and I probably didn't relate to her quite as much, but I do now. So, that's just changed.
Yeah, there's a little discussion going on in the chat about Nynaeve, which is one that I think, particularly men of a certain age that started reading Wheel of Time when they were teenagers probably didn't react very well to that character. But speaking for myself, she's probably one of my favorites now, where I'm just like, I'm really on your side in all of this from the first page that we meet her to the end. Is that part of the appeal of Wheel of Time, that layer that's almost like an onion, where it's just there's just everything from characters to places to the history of it, how it interacts with our own world? Is that part of the appeal as well?
I mean, I would say yes, but it's almost that subconscious appeal, right? Like I don't think you're always aware that it's happening, you don't necessarily notice it, but things might sound familiar in some cases, or you heard a story that was like something, and this is kind of a different telling of that story, right? Jordan's been able to use that idea, but he's like created actual rules in his world that accommodate for things other authors do that are just kind of like, oh, he's just retelling us the story of X. But Jordan's actually brilliantly built it in. You're like, yeah, it was another turning, like it somehow fits into your understanding of the world is our world. Does that make sense? Like it's not because you can look at our world and say, I understand it. It's because it feels like it's a version of it enough. But it's a multiverse concept that doesn't require you to kind of do math to understand necessarily. You're not like, you don't have to understand the numbers of chaos, if you will. You can conceptualize what he's trying to tell you in the way that he gives analogies, and all of a sudden this whole idea of a wheel makes sense to you, and everything just kind of weaves right into how he's telling it. And it's like it feels like it's just going right into your brain, like, oh, I get this, and this makes sense. And each time I do this, each reading is a new turning, right? Jordan uses this like, your readings are new turnings and variations of things you thought before, but now you're a different person and you have a different concept of things. And so you're seeing and understanding different lessons, or, so it just works with the way you interact with the world.
And I think you see it a lot in the fandom, where there are some people that come out and they're adamant. They're adamant that this is the way this is. This has to be, and it's for a bunch of different things. And I won't get into them because some of them can get quite heated with other people, but they're sure that this has to be the way it is, and it's wrong if you think differently. And then you have so many other people saying, well, no, here are all the examples of why that isn't the way you think, because you're not quite at that point in your life, or you haven't experienced these things, or you haven't noticed these other things in the rereads to give you the information, because there's so, like Matt said, there's so much information in the books that you're going to miss lots. Every time I read it still, I see, or I think I see new things. I probably recognized them before, like Matt said, but I have Swiss cheese brain, so it all comes in and goes out right away. I'm getting older. But there's just so much to see there. And I think Matt and Rebecca are both very, very good at the intellectual stuff, where they see, they understand, they can tear it apart. I'm terrible at that. I'm really, really horrible at that stuff. I just enjoy it for what it is, but I enjoy it differently every time.
Yeah.
There you go. So the Dusty Wheel and Reading the Pattern are the intellectual side of the Wheel of Time.
I would say so. They're much smarter than I am. That's for sure.
Hold on. That's not. I would not say. I would say Reading the Pattern is. I would say we are very narrowly at the Dusty Wheel when it comes to intellectual, focused on very specific topics. Like, I was going to say that about my reading in the books. Maybe it'll shock you. I have not. Should I admit that? I'm trying to think if I've admitted this before. I have not read A Memory of Light more than twice ever.
I was hoping you'd say you have not read it at all.
At all? Never. I did a beta read on it, but I didn't actually do the beta read. I just kind of like was happy to have the text and let it sit there. But yeah, saw somebody in chat say unsubscribe.
Unsubscribe. the Dusty
Totally,
Room.
you can totally make sense. Yeah, no, I read a lot of all the earlier books I've read many times, but a lot of my interest is not in rereading the entire story. It's inspecting the story, researching the world of the story. So if you ask me how many hours I've spent looking into the metaphysics and Lanfear and Varen, take that time, I probably could have read the books 20 times with that time. But I was much more interested in the characters and dissecting them and making theories out of what I found in the books than I was always having to do rereads. That's just the way I fan when it comes to the material.
Yeah. I mean, that's great. Everybody has different ways that they can be a fan. And that, I don't know, that's one of the things I love about it is like, there's so many ways to engage with this series. And that's exciting. But I do love the themes of it and the new turnings and I don't know. I think that's a gift to enjoying and understanding the series that is built into it.
And I think it's a series that keeps on giving, because not only do we have obviously the TV show and everything else that's going to happen in the future, but we even have stuff like Origins of the Wheel of Time that was mentioned before, and there was a lot of stuff from my own kind of research and watching your channels that I kind of knew about, but then there's other things in that book where I was like, wow, okay, I never really put that and that together, and I can't wait to go back and look at specific things and read certain bits of the book again, and knowing this knowledge that was in this that was so well put together in this book, and this is a series that is essentially 32 plus years old now. There's still new things to discover in it and new things to immerse yourself in, which is, as a writer myself, I kind of think I should probably just give up, because there's just no way that this is ever what a great achievement. But so we kind of move on a little bit, and what I want to kind of do is kind of wind back a little bit as well and just start at the beginning. I can remember vividly finding out about the Wheel of Time. I was traveling a lot of work at the time. I was a late teenager, and I was traveling from one to a place called Birkenhead all the time, every day, which was like about a 2.5 hour journey, which is a lot in English terms. It's not so much stateside or anything, but like 2.5 hours, it's like, come on, this is just too much. But I was doing a lot of traveling on the underground, and I remember seeing a poster for a book, a guy called Robert Jordan. The book was Crossroads of Twilight, and the quote on it was the famous quote that the Jordan has uncovered the world that Tolkien began to reveal. And I thought, you know what, I am going to get that book, whatever book it is. I have no idea what it is. As soon as I get on my break at work, I'm going. So I went over to the bookshop and went in and I said, do you have this book called Crossroads of Twilight? And they're like, yes. Have you read the other ones yet? And I was like, there are other ones. And and the person working there brought me over to the section, and then there was this big chunk of a whole row of all these books, and I was like, wow, okay. And so I got the Eye of the World, and never looked back afterwards. I think I actually went back on my dinner on my lunch break and bought the next 3 books, because I just enjoyed the start of the Eye of the World so much. So I'd like to know from all of you, like, do you remember when you first decided to pick up, and what was it that drew you to the series? If you want to start with Rebecca, because you're nodding your head.
Okay, yeah, I'll start. Because I probably started most recently of all of you. But as I said, I was 24. I was this was 2007, newly married. Now you know how old I am. It was Robert Jordan's death, actually, that got me to read the book, which is weird. But no, I just told you how old I am, so I'm old too. But so my husband had been reading these books since he was a teenager, so long before I met him and everything. And but as I'd known him, I knew he was a fan and he was reading them, but he never tried to get me to read them or anything, which I don't know why. But when Robert Jordan died, that affected him. He was really, sad and upset about that. And so that was it, really, I guess, because I'm like, well, if this is that important to him, it's a big deal, and he's affected by the death of this author. And so then I started reading. So I started reading even before Brandon Sanderson was announced to be continuing the series. But I mean, I think even when he died, there was still like, okay, well, the series might get finished, but it like no one had been announced, to do it. So that's when I started reading.
And so you had no idea it was going to get completed, but you were just like, I'm just going to read and see what.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I was taking a risk then that it wasn't going to get finished, but I do seem to recall that even at the time that he died, there was some hope that it would be, right? Maybe because he had said, I don't remember the specifics now, maybe Matt would remember better, like what the reaction in the fandom was then. Like, did people kind of think, oh, this will get finished, or does it seem like a long shot? I don't remember, but
I don't think we believed it would.
Yeah,
I don't think we were familiar. I believe this has been shared, I thought maybe in Origins of the Wheel of Time. I don't think any of us knew at the time that Jordan had changed his mind. There were some quotes from Jordan early on where he was like, I think it was due to some other author. In other words, there was a reason why he was asking, like, would anyone else ever finish this if he didn't finish it? And he was like, never. I don't remember the exact quote, but he's like, burn the notes or whatever, he changed his mind. And I don't think any of us recognize, like, I don't think we were all like, oh, this is gonna be finished. But we were all just kind of, as fans, like in mourning with obviously the family that lost this individual that obviously had become important to our lives in this way. But I don't think we had, what do I remember? We did not have any concept like that there would be an end.
Yeah, actually, it's funny because I was 15 years ago yesterday that Brandon Sanderson was announced to be the one to complete the book. So, I mean, I don't think it was too long then. It was a matter of months, I suppose, to when he was announced, but it was perhaps in that window there,
it was quite I mean, that part of it was speedy, but the whole thing was quite fast because I mean, obviously Robert Jordan used to blog quite a lot on his website, and that's where a lot of people used to get the news. And then he was still kind of blogging away. Then his cousin took over, and then it was just suddenly it was a shock for everyone. I find it very, very endearing actually that you've seen the effect that had on your husband, got you to start reading the books. I think that's just a really nice story to get into it.
And now you're here.
And I'm a terrible person compared to these two and the rest of the fans, apparently, because I didn't see Jordan as a person. That makes any sense. He was an author that wrote books that I liked, and when I heard he passed, and I will fully admit this, and I feel terrible to this day for it, but I fully admit my first thought was, well, shit, I'm not going to read how this ends. There was no sadness or mourning or being upset or thinking about the family or thinking about anything else. It was just like, I'm not going to get to read these cool books. And that's all I thought about. Now I'm a little bit older. I'm a little bit wiser, and I'm more involved in the fandom now. And I realize how terrible that is now. And I feel horrible for it, but full disclosure, that's how I thought at the time. Like it was.
You can't have been very old at the time. So I suppose, that's young, blame it on being young.
Yeah. I think you had a doppelganger in the chat as well, because he was just said exactly what you said, and then was like, "Oh, John just said what I said."
Well, the only reason I think that maybe my thought process at the time was a little bit different was just because we've been trying to go to conventions and get answered. Like it was like we felt this maybe closer kinship because I had gone to a convention, I had met him, I had asked him questions. He famously. Like I told him he was killing my theories left and right, and he famously said something like the small whimper of a theory as it dies is a sweet sound or something like that. So it basically like I don't know, he said something to that effect where he literally said it to me, and I remember thinking like, I have to write this down. Like at the moment I was like, I cannot believe this author that has this series that I love so much just said those words to me, because I love theorizing, and the fact that he senses some almost like glee, or there's that kind of like, this is a game for him too, this is fun for him, and I remember thinking that so yeah, I think there was a little bit more there, John, but I will say this, all of us talked about the idea, as morbid as it was at the time, right? Any author, like you look at any author that has a long-running series that hasn't finished it, you're like, is the end of the story? Of course that thought comes to you, right? Will I ever see the end of the story? And so it's not like all of us out there did not have that thought. It's just maybe, like you said, some felt more, he felt more human to some than others, if that makes sense.
As a writer, every time I get on a plane, I email my manuscript to someone and say, if I die, this plane crashes, you can finish this book. So I'm sure it happened. I'm sure it happened. And before, if anyone asked me before that, I'd be like, no one can finish it other than me. But then when it's at that time, you're like, well, okay, you've got it just in case. Matt, when did you? I mean, you talked about reading them when you were starting when you were 15, when World first came out. What was it that drew you to it? Because obviously it was completely unknown at the time when you started reading.
Yeah, I've told the story, so I won't tell much of it because I think people have heard this, but I'll give you the kind of highlights. But basically, I was a library geek, as in that's where I felt like some kinship with other people like me. They liked books, and especially in the science fiction fantasy, I didn't really go to the nonfiction side of the library much, other than to be like, you guys are weird and I'm going back to the cool place. But I basically just realized I had a voracious appetite for reading good, fun stories, good, interesting stories. And science fiction fantasy, I thought it was a great escape mechanism when I first kind of, Tolkien, Feist, Weiss and Hickman, Eddings, Asimov. And I started reading these series and I would run out of things, because I'd read them fast and I'd be like, okay, what's the next one? What's the next one? And the librarian pointed out that, they always had that new desk, the books that are new. And it was basically like new author, new book. And it was big and blue and it was huge. And right by the time I had read all these other books, I was like, I need a story that's not going to be 200 pages long because it's not satisfactory at all. I remember seeing how big this book was, and the blue cover was actually, as much crap as we give Daryl Sweet sometimes, beautiful. I remember at the time thinking like, this looks like just like what I want to be reading. And so I think just knowing it was a huge story and the cover, those together, I was like, I'm going to try this. And that's how I got into it.
Excellent. I actually, the cover is iconic. As you say, as much as crappy that he does get, like that cover is still, there is still problems with the cover. Obviously, there's an extra person on as and now
Nicolas
we know
Cage.
as well. Yeah, but it's still iconic. It's still an iconic cover, and it definitely does stand out. John, what was it that do you remember when you decided to dive in?
I do, and like Matt said, I told the story probably a lot, but I'll give the abridged version of it. I read a lot as a kid, a whole lot. And I read a lot of fantasy, a lot of sci-fi, and like Matt said, a lot of smaller books. I think I just finished reading the Fuzzy Papers. I don't remember the author. It's an older sci-fi book, really good. I liked it. And it was Christmas of 1990. I got a Kohl's bookstore gift certificate for Christmas, and so I went in, and I remember I didn't pick out books based on what they were about. I was 9. I looked at the covers and I saw 2 books, and they were almost side by side. One was Homeland by Ari Salvador, and the other one was The Eye of the World by Robert Jordan. And I remember picking up Homeland because it looked cool, because it had like an orange cover and it was kind of embossed and stuff. And I was like, this is a really neat looking book. It's small, but I liked it. And then I saw the Eye of the World with the big guy in armor on the front of it, the big blue cover, the like you've all said, a lot of people give him shit for the covers, but it is cool looking cover. The Eye of the World is a cool looking cover, and that's why I picked it up. I picked it up then, and then I waited for every book to come out after that.
Did you ever go back and read Homeland?
Yes, yeah. I've read all. I've read them all right up until I think the Tao of Drizzt. I'm terrible at pronouncing things, and that's the most recent one I've read. So I do read other things occasionally other than cereal boxes, but not often.
Right, sure. I don't believe that.
You're saying that now just so you don't look as.
That's right.
Times.
There's other books back there somewhere.
Before we move on to the next kind of topic, anyone in the chat, if you do have any specific questions that you want to ask us, if you ask us in there's a Q&A section in the webinar. If you ask us in that, they won't get lost in the chat. But please keep on going. But we're trying to jump in there as much as we can as well. There's some there's quite a lot of talk about Trakans as well at the moment, and now we're on to the extra person that was on the cover of the Wheel of Time. So you've all kind of touched on it at various points, but we'll just kind of dive into it a little bit deeper about there's different aspects of these books that people enjoy. Lots of different aspects, and I think it speaks to the quality and the longevity of the series. There, it's not just about the story, and it's not just about the characters. It's about the themes that he was ingrained into the books, the you know, all this kind of different techniques that he was putting in there, and the different areas that he would shine a lens on. So I just, if we want to start with Matt, what is it that keeps bringing you back to Wheel of Time? What is it that takes your interest the most? You know, if you just take away certain things from it, it's like, this is the thing that I love the most about the Wheel of Time. What would that be for you?
I mean, beyond Lanfear, I think you're asking, and beyond theorizing. Yeah, I'll take away from kind of just like the fun in-world, like theorizing nature of being a fan. And I think the story itself for me is, I guess, just about how important people are to each other's lives, and what they don't often realize collectively to, you know, accomplishing something, whether or not it's and how each person can, you know, whether or not for good or ill, affect the world and others around them. Kind of like, it's that whole concept of weaving lives. I think as you age, you're just so much aware of how all of the generations that came before you have affected you and others around you in ways that you can't like prevent, just ways you have to deal with. And that you, as a, you know, I'm a parent of children, like you also, they're going to look back at you and the people you were around and the people they were around, and feel that as they, and so that Jordan's captured that, I think, beautifully in the way that he talks about the Wheel of Time, if you will, and the way that he writes. And so I think that's what keeps me going, is I feel like this, it's telling a story that I can associate with in real life, but in a fantasy sense. And so I feel like there's that aspect of it that brings me back. It's that nature of the weaving of life and the impact we have on each other's lives. So yeah.
Anyone else wants to jump in?
Yeah, sure. So I mean, I agree with that completely. And I think that, just building off of that a little bit, I mean, Jordan envisioned like the Wheel of Time on this sort of massive scale, and the 7 ages and thousands of years. And I think, you know, especially as I get older, I realize more too, the way that cycles repeat in some sense on a smaller scale, right? Like you can look at recent generations and world events and things that are very familiar, right? You know, and of course, I love the idea too that it's not identical every time it comes around again. Like there's certain themes and things that will reoccur, which I think is very true. It's not like, I think people imagine like, oh, it's exact. It's so identical and exact, and everything beat per beat is exactly the same. And I think it's much more about the way things change, right? Some things stay the same, but it's also about what changes, you know, each time. And I think that's kind of endlessly fascinating. But also, I mean, for me, always what brings me back to any story, and there's lots of stories that I like to revisit. If I care about something and enjoy something, I will revisit it. It's the characters, because, you know, again, there's so many characters and such depth to them, and so many different variations of the way people, they're all a part of this whole story. And you remove any one person and the ripple effect is massive. But you can sort of drop in and look at the story from all these different perspectives. And Jordan did that incredibly well. And I don't know, there's such depth to it, to the world. And then the other thing about fantasy is, like, you know, it allows you to sort of explore and deal with really tough, painful things in a way that's just a degree removed from reality. And I appreciate that degree of removal a lot of times. So yeah.
Jump.
For me, I would say it's more of the emotions. I ascribe to certain things that happen in the books. So I like the relationships between the characters. I like the emotions that the different storylines or the meetings or the way the characters interact with each other make me feel. And that's what I like most about the books. And that's never changed, no matter how many times I've read them over and over again. And aside from that, part of the reason I think why I liked the show so much was because I always thought, what if? So I didn't really theorize things. I didn't really like try to dive into the metaphysics things or the history of things in the books. But I always thought, well, this character hasn't been on page for a while. What were they doing? So I really, for that reason, I really enjoyed River of Souls when Brandon Sanderson released that short story about Demandred and the things that had happened in between, because he really wasn't on page enough for me. And I really enjoyed his storyline when we did see him. But especially when I was younger, I'd make up stories all the time in my head. Like, these are the things that are happening that could have been happening with the Wheel of Time. So when the show came out and things are different, obviously, with the show, I really did enjoy the differences, because that's something I did my whole life when I read the books. I was like, the books are great, but what if? I really like the what if.
I think the theories, Matt mentioned before, theories were my thing. I know, so Matt got his claws into me very early on. I was one of the people that came onto the internet demanding to know everything about Taim and Demandred, and I still have an axe to grind about it.
Well, it's pretty amazing when you think about it, how many point of views he gave us, how many people he introduced, how many name characters he has, and we still are like, can I get a little more? You know what I mean? We're like, I just want to know the story behind this other character that you named, but we didn't get anything. Can you just tell me that? And it is funny when you think about maybe other authors that might a tenth of that, right, that they might have in a book, if, right? And Jordan does so, and as we want to, the world feels so tangible that we often are just like, just want you to fill in another little piece, which is this other person, you know. So I just think it's really funny.
Yeah, there's a real kind of like, you know, because people are so attached to so much stuff in the Wheel of Time that when you go on to one of your shows and you do reveal some of these things, like Matt, you've seen Robert Jordan's notes, and Rebecca, you deep dive into a lot of things, and John, you know a lot of the stuff that's going on behind things, that when you get this nugget of something that backs up something that you thought about for about 20 years, you just have this real sense of validation that it's like, one time it was like this. It may not have ended like this, but that one little bit when Robert Jordan thought about this, I was right. And everyone has a little piece of it. It's like we all have this kind of little bit of ownership of the Wheel of Time somewhere along the way.
Yeah.
Which is a great thing. So we've got a few questions from YouTube. We'll go with first, so we don't lose them in the chat. So we have a question from Elfwitch on YouTube that wants to know, what was the first scene or story arc that hooked you in the Wheel of Time? If you can remember.
That's easy for me.
Excellent.
Go then.
Do you mind if I start then?
Go ahead.
It's an easy one for me. When Rand met Morghese for the first time, when he fell into the gardens and he met Elaine, Gowan, and Galad, and they pulled his sword out of his sheath and they saw the heron mark on his blade, and everyone was prepared to die. At that point, I was hooked in the series. It is still, no matter how many other iconic scenes and big things were in the series, that's still my favorite scene in the entire series. That easy peasy. I was eating an orange popsicle when I read it. I remember that much too.
It is hard to remember, honestly. But I will say this, at the time I was really into gaming, and like there was an advanced Dungeons and Dragons kind of games. I really liked the idea of going, you know, they'd go into like the cemetery and then you'd run into this character. There was something about Shedar Logoth where, you know, they left the village and the village was fine, but they get to Shedar Logoth and then they meet, right, Mordeth, and you get this, you're like, what is this place? I want to know. That was my first kind of like, how did it come to be this way? And I want to understand this. This is an interesting dungeon, right, that I wish we'd inspect more. And so as Jordan would go to other places, that's how I'd start to kind of be like, oh man, we got to go back to Shedar Logoth and I want to know what. So I think there's an aspect of my gaming and what I loved about Advanced Dungeons and Dragons that would worked into this, what I loved about the Wheel of Time.
It's hard for me to pinpoint an exact thing. So, I mean, I know I was pretty hooked straight through. Like, I mean, when I read The Eye of the World, I just went right through and read all of them. Like, I didn't pause up until, again, it was Knife of Dreams that had come out. So that far. So, I mean, the prologue of The Eye of the World definitely intrigued me, right? Like that was something different that I had not read before. So the cut from that to this other type of environment was a big thing. And then I think another thing that I can maybe pinpoint is like when they get to Berlon and they meet Min, and she's having these weird visions, and she's saying all these kinds of things that you do not understand, right? Like she's saying a whole bunch of stuff that you don't understand, but it's there that you kind of get a hint of like, okay, there's a lot more like layers to this, like hints about things that like, that's just intriguing, right? It's like setting up mystery that like at some point you're going to learn more about these things. So that was maybe a point that got me too.
Yeah, Min, that's the same with mine. I'm a big Min fan. I think she's probably my favorite, probably top 2 favorite characters. But that was my thing. So the whole kind of gentle Fellowship of the Ring reminders worked for me. I kind of like that. I was like, I know this. I know this is good. And then when it got to that bit with Min, I was like, hang on a second, there's something else going on here. Not that I minded the Lord of the Rings reminder or anything. I quite enjoyed that side of it, but it was definitely just like a little hint, like this isn't the story that you think it is.
I think that was that for me too, because it was the same thing. Like as I'm reading those early chapters, I'm like, oh, but there's all these Lord of the Rings references. I remember saying that at the time. I'm like, but this is like Lord of the Rings, and this is like Lord of the Rings, and I think my husband was just like, yeah, like keep reading. So.
Another question from YouTube. Lumen wants to know what is the heart of the story of the Wheel of Time, which is, you know, it's a really great question because it is so expansive and there's so many storylines and there's so many subplots, but there is a real heart to it as well. So what would be the heart of the story in all your opinions? All deep in thought here. I mean,
I'll throw something in. I mean, I feel like I'll take the most obvious one. The heart of the story is the people, right? Again, I don't know how spoiler we are, but you know, I think
go for it.
The famous line about it being about basically all of them, right?
Yeah.
And I think the heart of the story to me is the characters and their stories. You know, Tam Althor is just the heart of the books in many ways, and so are so many other characters. It's the characters you fall in love with, basically, right? It's the family that they've become. So I think that you have to bring up the characters and their lives as one of the pieces of the heart of the actual series.
I take it a step further and say the relationships between the characters and how they interact with each other. I mean, they change throughout the whole story and they interact with each other differently, but I feel the relationships and the emotion they have with each other, for me anyway.
Yeah, so I mean, I completely agree with those things. And then the only thing I would add is that in terms of like theme, because part of the theme is, again, it's about them all. It's not about one person. That's part of the theme. And I think another really important aspect of the theme is like that what you choose, what you do matters in circumstances. Like we're all going to be in circumstances where we feel like there's a lot of things out of our control. Like we're not all Taviran, right? Like we don't have that concept, but we're all going to like struggle with that. Like there are world forces that like we come up against and we feel like so many things are out of our control and there's nothing we can do. So that theme that like, it does matter, you know, like that you can break a cycle, that you can do something differently this time. I think that matters.
So, what drove something that I want to know, this is a question from me. What drove you all to want to become content creators? Because obviously you all and you talk as much about your channels as much as you want at this point, but I'm sure lots of people here would know about you all already. But what was it that I mean, it does become, because you're all very successful at it, it becomes pretty much like a full-time job as well, and more than a full-time job actually, I'd imagine. So what was it that drove you to be like, you know what, I'm going to do this, and why? Did you decide?
Well, I mean, for me, it was pretty simple, I guess. Like, you know, the TV show was coming out. That's what made me wanted to like get involved in the fandom. So knowing that the show was coming out, and I had so many thoughts about like, how were they going to take these books and make it into a show? Like that was just like an endlessly fascinating question to me. And I love this idea of it as a new turning of the wheel and a different turning of the wheel. That to me, like, I embrace that, like, yes, give it to me. Like, it's not like, oh, okay, yeah, I guess that makes sense. No, I love it. So that was what made me want to make content.
For me, it's not a deep reason by any stretch of the imagination at all. I have inattentive ADD, so I tend to hyper focus on things, and the only thing I've really focused on my whole life and not dropped was the Wheel of Time. So I would pick up a hobby, hyper focus for a bit, spend a bunch of money on it, and get tired of it real quick, and then pick up a new hobby. And at the time, I needed another hobby, and I remember mentioning to my wife, "I'm going to make a YouTube channel," and she was like, "Sure you are. Of course you are. You go right ahead." And I needed something to not drive. Yeah, well, little do you know that this is where we ended up, but I needed something to not drive her crazy. So I started the channel, and I found out that because I focused on the Wheel of Time for so long, it's not something I was going to drop, and it just kind of kept with it. It's one of the very few things I've kept with in my life. So that's just what it was. I just needed a hobby.
I think all of my content creation endeavors have always been to find out if there's anyone out there like me. And that is to say, you know, I would go places online and see other things and be like, that's not what I care about. That's not what I care about. And I would see some people doing some of the theorizing and discussion on forums, and I'm like, I can't handle it there. I need a place where it can just be the little world I want to create, and it's about the thing I want it to be about, and we can all just focus on that thing. So the first time, I think it was very much about finding those people that cared about the nuance of the books and just wanted to discuss the awesomeness of Wheel of Time theories. And so it was like, well, if someone else doesn't have it, I have this new job, and somebody gave me an HTML for Dummies book, and I can learn how to do this. And then I tell people this, and it's true. People would submit a form with a reply to a comment, and I would HTML code their comment into the HTML page thousands and thousands of times. I can't get that time back. I should have found a programmer much earlier than I ever did. And but it was that love of like, cool, they want to show up and take part in this thing I'm doing. Of course I will spend gobs of amount of my life having these conversations. So the second time, prompted by a friend, was similar, but it was, how can I not spend as much time like I did last time and still find people to talk about this? I know I'll do a live call-in talk show. That way I don't have to produce anything. I'm just talking to people. And I can tell you this, that did not work out as far as saving time. I've spent untold hours coming up with YouTube thumbnails and telling people about this thing and actually doing the show. And so, yeah, but this second time wasn't about finding only those people. It was just about creating a space for fans to talk in that way, to talk in a live call-in kind of way about the Wheel of Time. I thought that was fun. I thought that idea was a fun thing that hadn't been being done at the time. And so, yeah, it was, but it's always been about finding fellow fans to talk about the Wheel of Time.
And all three of you also spend a lot of time interacting with other content creators, and especially new content creators, and kind of getting their voices out there and their kind of niche and their spin on it as well. Why is that something that you think, and that's something that's very unique to the Wheel of Time fandom, I think, because I was part of other fandoms in my youth that I've kind of left behind because they become quite toxic and they become this and this, and a lot of it is kind of like people like, this is my garden, don't stay out of here, this is what I talk about, this is what I do. Wheel of Time is completely different from that. It's all like, come here, talk about it, we'll bring it up. What is it about? Why do you think that is with the Wheel of Time fandom? Why do you think there is that such a community that's quite fascinating? And it's kind of survived the TV show as well, which is always the worry when something like that happens. It's like, oh, what's going to happen with this? But it's continued on, which is great to see.
I mean, it's a big world that we all have. There's all room for all of us to play in it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, I think that's part of it, is just like the world is like so expansive, and you know, people kind of find their different niches. And again, like I said before, there's like so many different ways to be a fan. And plus, I mean, one thing we also kind of have in common is like how much we really like just like nerding out and talking about this stuff. So like you need other people who are going to do that with you, who are going to like tolerate you wanting to like obsess over like tiny little details about stuff. So yeah, you have to like be nice to your fellow nerds because they're the people who want to talk about that crap with you.
I know in some fandoms, and it does happen in the Wheel of Time fandom too. Not everybody's perfect. There's this essence or aura of competition. I want to be better. This is, like you said, the state of my garden. I don't feel that because this isn't a job for me. This is a passion. This is something I like. So if someone new comes along and they're doing something Wheel of Time related, I don't care what it is. I'm happy. It makes more Wheel of Time is better as far as I'm concerned. So I like showcasing new creators, people who make things, especially since there's not a whole lot of merchandise right now surrounding the show or the books. I love that stuff because without other people doing things like that, we wouldn't have all the cool things we have now. And like Rebecca said, everybody has their own perspectives. There's no one way to be a fan. Everyone does things a little bit differently. And it's nice to hear all those different opinions and different views on things. No one is right by themselves, if that makes any sense.
Yeah.
And I would just add, the only difference here for me is just that that I was just doing it so long that I realized that a lot of what I wanted to do was take any awareness people had of me and the reason that they were showing up because they knew who I was, and then using that as a way to highlight other creators. Does that make sense? Like I've had opportunities that I want other fans to have, and I've had access that I would like other fans to have. And so I love supporting just the unique creativity of Wheel of Time fandom in a way that it's like, okay, you've given me an audience, and now I'd like to introduce them all to you as much as I can. Because again, like John said, and like Rebecca said, this isn't a money-making endeavor. There is literally at this point, it wouldn't matter how much anyone paid. If I went back to the last 3 years or last 20 some odd years I've been doing this, I would always end up at like 0.001 whatever cent per hour of the time that's been spent. It's never been about that. And what frees me up with that is that it then can just remain the fun thing that I like to do, which is talk about the Wheel of Time, meet new fans like these two wonderful people, I guess, and you too, Dave, and talk about the Wheel of Time. And that's really, I think, what it is, right? We're excited when we meet other fans that want to talk about it. So of course we're going to work with them and talk to them about it because they want to be there. They want to be talking about it.
Exactly.
Yeah, the people who think we like make money, like Amazon is like paying us to say that we like this. No.
I only own this shirt. I don't own anything else. That's all I can afford.
I can't say no enough times to emphasize how deeply wrong that is. So yeah.
Well, if this makes sense, I've always been a shill for the Wheel of Time. And that is to say, I've always loved the series enough that I was willing to give it gobs of my time without anything back. It's because I love it. And so telling people about the Wheel of Time, that's, I guess I've always been that person.
But you don't get paid for it. It's not coming with any compensation.
Unpaid gig.
So we've talked quite a lot about the past of the Wheel of Time and your past with the Wheel of Time. But one of the things that people like to talk about, even when the books were coming out, was the future of the Wheel of Time. You know, that was one of the main drives about what was going to happen. And even now, when we have 14 books and a prequel, we have various companion books, we have a TV show, there's 4.4 million words in the main series of books. People are always like, is there going to be a little bit more? What's next? What are we going to get next? So before we get to we've got quite a few questions from viewers. Keep those coming in. So I just want to briefly talk about your hopes for the future, because obviously we have the season 2 of the TV show coming out at some point in 2023. Hopefully the sooner the better. Season 3 is about to start filming as well. And obviously with the origins of the Wheel of Time that came out, and that there's just those like little questions I keep seeing now. People are talking about prequels and outriggers, because you know whenever they get mentioned in any kind of place, people are like, maybe someone will write them. So what do you hope to see with the future? Because obviously with a TV show, there is other TV shows and movies and everything that have been whispered about and planned, and video games and all this kind of stuff. would you like to see what more of that? What would you like to see with a TV show? Would you like to see more books written in the Wheel of Time universe? Which is always an interesting question, because some people are very against it and some people are quite open to it.
I'm very much for it. I'm very much for
Me too.
more
Very much for
content. Yes, I don't want it to become the. I'm not going to. I guess I won't name another group, but I don't want it to become diluted in the sense that we're just doing everything all at once. And but I would love to see eventually, graphic novels or people given the rights to write in the world. I think there's enough of the world there that you can sing stories that can always be considered like, whatever, not officially obviously written by Robert Jordan, but just, again, turnings of another, you can use the content of the time to get more content. So I would love to see more content, and I'm looking forward to it.
And I think the fact that Jordan wrote Conan books, Jordan didn't create Conan. So there's some setup there that for it to maybe happen again in the future. And again, I don't know if that ever would, but I would love to see other writers pick up. Brandon did a fantastic job. And I don't know if Brandon ever would write more Wheel of Time books. I think Matt would know better than me, but I think he's gone on record saying that this is it for him. He doesn't plan on it. It's not a thing ever. But anyone else, I'd be happy with that. Now, like you said, there are rumors of cartoons like an anime. There are rumors of video games. There are rumors of multitude of different things. But the rights are convoluted. The rights are held by different people for different things. I don't care who makes it. Personally, for myself, I just like Wheel of Time stuff. I want more Wheel of Time stuff. So,
yeah. I might be slightly less gung-ho than you guys, but I'm not opposed to it. I mean, I think like when it comes to like written, like more books, having read Origins of the Wheel of Time and just kind of I haven't, gotten the opportunity to go and look at the notes or anything like some people have, but my understanding is that for some aspects of what Jordan had planned to write, like for prequels, there's probably more on some parts of that in terms of notes to draw on than others. Like my understanding from the Origins of the Wheel of Time is whatever he had thought of for the post Memory of Light books, there's like virtually nothing on that. So that would be way more speculative. I feel like it would take a lot more that would then probably deviate quite a bit from whatever, to do something like that. But if you wanted to go and like fill in some of the prequel stuff that he had envisioned, there might be more there that the right person could do that. So yeah, I mean, I would just love the show I would love the show to get a full run. That's what I want more than anything, is for the show to get a full run for that. If that is popular and successful enough that it gets to do that, right? If it gets to go that far, then I could see there being interest. That's the way things are now. And like, hey, let's do an Age of Legends show or something. And I mean, I'd watch it for sure. Like if they could ever sort out the rights and, that happened down the road. Like I said, there's so much opportunity there, but I would be wary too, I guess. Like, you want anything that comes out that is attached to the Wheel of Time, you'd want it to be well thought out, I guess, is the main thing.
but I mean, more books would be ideal. The Origins of Wheel of Time was the very first book in a long, long time that I sat in my front step and waited for Purelator to show up and deliver it to me. So I knew it was coming, and I just sat outside and I waited. So if there were more Wheel of Time books, it would be the same. It was a level of excitement I hadn't felt in a long time for a book. So I would love to see prequels or after thoughts, like with Matt and Perrin and Rand and things that happen afterwards. Will we ever get them? I don't know. I don't think so, but I would read them regardless of the quality. I'd read them at least once.
I mean, I'd probably read them too. I'm not going to lie, but but anyway, yeah.
If before we go on to viewer questions, if there was a singular book announced or a trilogy of something set in the Wheel of Time, what time frame or what subject matter would you just love to see more than anything else? Just to start off, mine would be, and I've always thought this since he was even first mentioned, is the Arthur Hawkwind story. I would love to see a trilogy set around him, and obviously with that, then you could spin off to Sean Chan and everything like that if you wanted to as well. But I would just love to see that story of his rise and fall, and I just think it'd be. I think it's just there's so much there that would be a terrific trilogy. I'd be curious to what you all think.
I want to see Matt. Breaking the world. There you go. You want to see that, Matt? Like a full...
Oh my gosh! I mean, come on. I mean, the book started off with a prologue of a character who's like, "You just murdered your entire family, and I'm going to heal you with this dark power," and then he gates away and kills himself with it, and you're like, how did it get to that moment? I would love to see the story that led to the prologue. Would just be, I'd love that.
I think that probably makes the most sense as far as like an epic, other period of time to focus on, and that ties right in. Like, I would love that too. Someone in the comments was saying like a Varen prequel would be amazing. And if I was going to read something, that would be amazing. That might be the thing I'd most want to read. Like, what you were talking about, Matt, like, I'd love to see that on screen, I guess. At this point, if they were going to adapt that, I'd like to see it on screen.
Yep.
I'd want to see Matt going to Sean Chan and kicking ass and consolidating and changing things. That would be great. But more than that, I want to see the first channelers.
Yeah,
I want to see the beginning of the age anyway, like the first age. Like I said, there's no real beginning, but the first channelers of this cycle would be, I think, would be interesting.
That would be interesting. I always find that interesting. The first person that was able to use magic. I mean, what were they thinking? What were they trying to do at the time when it happened? Just suddenly just send balefire out of their hands or something. They're really angry or something like. It's like, oh. Yeah, that would be an interesting one. So we got some questions. So this one's always a popular one. I always like people's answers for this one. I've seen this one on all of your shows before. Glenn wants to know, what small scene from the Wheel of Time would you love to see adapted the most? I know John's is probably we didn't get it in season 1. Hopefully we will get it in season 2. But yeah, what scenes?
Like in the whole series, or like a small scene in the first couple books or something?
Yeah. Let's go with the first few books, because it could be here all day.
I think you have to show Rand going mad from the Dragon Reborn. I think you need to show. I think that one I really want, because it's instructive to like what's happening to him, where he's feeling isolated and alone, and he's dealing with what's happening to him, and what lengths he's willing to go to survive that.
Where he lines the bodies up.
Yeah, making you kind of question. You have to see that. If that's not adapted in, I think that's tough. I think it's tough for people to understand what's happening internally with Rand, and I think that's perfect kind of material that you can adapt very easily, and I think it's very impactful. So.
Well, sadly, my answer would have been something that I like literally just found out is not going to happen, because I was hoping for some Matt and Tom stuff in season 2, because they have some stuff I really enjoy in The Dragon Reborn. And I would have said that because it's small and because it's not necessary. Like, you don't have to do it, but I just wanted it because I enjoy that dynamic that those two have. Like I would have loved Matt eating voraciously and Tom telling him to try not to eat the table, Did
you stuff those chickens up your sleeve, boy?
Yeah. I would have loved that. So I guess what I would say is, because they did a beautiful job of beginning that relationship between those two characters in season 1, and we know we're not going to see them in season 2. Like, I hope that we get the two of them reconnecting at some point in the show. Do you have to do it? No, but I want it.
Yeah,
I want to see the quarterstaff fight with Matt and Gowan and Glad. Now we know we're going to get some form of it. I think Rafe had said it in the Q&A that they're going to do it in some new and updated way. I can't remember the exact wording of what he said, but he implied that we were getting it. So I want to see that. I want to see Matt thump the crap out of them.
I'm hoping, mine's a really strange one. I'm just hoping to see Aludra so she can say that Thomas's mother is a goat, because that always makes me laugh. I don't know why, it just always does. I just love that little sequence, the whole party scene. It's like It's like Robert Jordan does like fantasy James Bond or something for a little while. I always so,
Yeah, I hope she's a character in the show. That would be cool.
yeah, I like the Illuminators. So Charlie wants to know, if you could add one Ajar to the White Tower, what would their focus be, and what would their color be as well?
Go ahead, John.
Don't make me start. I don't know.
Oh, okay. I have one. I have one that I'm very passionate about, but it's really an indictment of the Yellow Aja because they should be doing this. But like, someone needs to focus on mental health. Okay. Like, people in this world need help with mental health. So, you know, it should be the Yellow Aja, but if they're not going to do it, then somebody else can do it.
Yes.
You got one?
Engineering. Someone should focus on engineering, turning the power into really, really cool shit.
I don't
know what their color would be. But
I know I was gonna go along that. I mean, brown is kind of where my answer lies, but similar. Like, I feel like there's like a brown something mixed with something. John, I don't know. Maybe it would just all turn to brown anyway. But
tan, the tan.
But no, I think they doing something with the Browns' knowledge, if that makes sense. Like, I would have liked to have seen them, the research. I want the research facility that is like Brown Aja based, but is only has some other Aja colors, and it's like, you've done all the research into these things. Now let's actually build things. Like, think of the portal stones. Think of all of the ter'angreal that we get. Whatever grouping would have been responsible for the research and development of the ter'angreal. That's what I would have, back in the day when they didn't have these formal Ajas in the Age of Legends. That's what I'd love to see.
Yep.
Okay, so we have a question. This is an interesting one from. They're all interesting. I'm going to say that, but I'm going to stop saying they're interesting. They're all interesting questions. Okay. Jonathan in the webinar wants to know what questions for the series that were not covered in Michael Livingston's Origins of Wheel of Time do you wish had been covered or had more depth to them?
Someone else needs to start this time. I have to think.
Nakomi.
Yeah, well, people are thinking that if anyone wants
Nakomi.
to see more of this, there's a Nakomi show from the Dusty Wheel just from last night where they went into the Nakomi.
Yeah, I wish they covered that more. I wish there was more information and more explanation as to who, what, where, and why, rather than just this is what it is. And I mean, to be fair, a lot of fans over the years, and Matt could probably attest to this, had guessed that's what it was. Had guessed that this is what the answer to Nakomi was. I just wish there was a little bit more to it. That's all.
Yeah, it's tough for this book because it wasn't really meant to be, even revealing the Nakomi answer. This was meant to be like the root of these words, not necessarily like telling you like about what they were in world. So I guess the only thing I wanted more from his book was more of the glossary entries. Like, I feel like he kept on saying that he had a limited amount of pages, and I'm like, who in their right mind limited you? Like none of us picked up a 14-book series because we like 200-page books. Like, no one in their right mind would see a Wheel of Time book that's small and think that's the one I should buy. They'll see a Wheel of Time book that is 2 or 3 times that big. That's the one you should buy. So that's to me, that's what I wanted more of, which is just more of the glossary entries, which he talked about, like, that he was still he had been researching things, I guess, that he just wasn't ready to put in there, but he couldn't put it all in because of the limits.
Yeah, I'd probably agree with that. There wasn't any one thing that like I was expecting that we didn't get, but yeah, absolutely. But if there was more entries that could have been in the glossary that weren't in there, then yeah, I'd put those in.
Yeah, I was just in, one of my big things about Wheel of Time is all the Arthurian legend stuff. So I was just in my element. I was like, this is great. I could read this stuff all day. And I just like literally just pour through the thing, just read them all. But I was actually surprised by being Irish and living in Ireland. I was surprised pleasantly by how much Irish mythology that Jordan actually looks at as well, Welsh mythology, and because one of the famous things about the Wheel of Time is that people talk about the Eastern influence and all this, obviously, the Wheel of Time, but so much of it was very Celtic based as well, which was this book does a great job of unveiling. I have a question to me from Nikki DeCaster. Would you write in the Wheel of Time universe? Yes, I would. Just send me an email. Just get in touch with me. I'm here. I'm ready and
I
waiting.
would love to ideate in the world, if that makes sense. I would
Right.
like if someone was tasked to write in it, I would love to be in the room, not necessarily the writer's room, but like the pre-writer's room, where it's just like,
Right.
and maybe that is the writer's room, but I wouldn't be there to be a writer. I would just like to be there to be like, oh no, don't do that, because that would totally break stuff. Or this is a great idea, fun idea that hasn't been seen but is possible. I would love to kind of be part of the creative process that goes into that, but not the one responsible for putting the words on the page. I don't think I'm a writer per se, other than a researcher.
I just want to watch.
Facts.
Give me some popcorn and I'll sit in the room and just watch.
Yeah, well, when I get the call, when I get the email, I will bring you all in as my hive mind and be like, what are we going to do with this, right?
All right.
It's a deal. So a question about your channels and what you have done from Chris. We've probably just got a little bit of time for just a few more questions. We're actually running out of time, which is great. We could talk WoT for hours. Matt has talked WoT for hours, 12 hours, I think, at one point.
It wasn't just me, it was lots of fans.
You were there for most of them.
I was definitely there the entire time.
So Chris M from WoT Wiki wants to know, what advice do you all have for fans taking the leap into content creation?
My advice
Go,
is
John.
do something you like. Don't do it because you want to make money or have some notoriety, or because you want your 15 minutes. Do it because you like it. So if you really enjoy cross stitch, do Wheel of Time cross stitch. If that's what you like. And there are people out there that do that. If you like website creation or like Theoryland type stuff, like Matt used to, still does, I guess, do that. But don't do something because you think it would be popular or nobody else is doing it. Do something you like. If you like what you do, you won't ever get tired of it.
That's a good one. Yeah, I mean, I guess I think, explore what's out there, like, because there's all kinds of creation that's already out there. So like explore it a little bit, try and get familiar with what's out there. And then maybe try and create something that you'd like to see that you don't see, something that, it's just put your own spin on it. I mean, because of course, John is right. You gotta love it. If you don't really enjoy doing it, then, it's not worth it if you don't enjoy it. So make sure you enjoy it. And get a sense of humor about people who are really angry on the internet, because you encounter those people.
Yeah.
And
there's a lot of them.
Bothers you, think about it, because you
thick skin.
You gotta have a method for dealing with really angry people on the internet.
But don't not do it because you don't like. It's still difficult sometimes for me to read comments, and I have a hard time letting them go. But that would have prevented me from doing a lot of stuff I do. It's just, I think what Jonathan said in chat is true. Like, don't do it because you think it'll work out. Do it because you can't not do it. That's a really good indicator that you should be doing something. And whether or not it's the internet, I think I've said this, content creator is interaction, right? It's, if you are joining a community and you are interacting with it on a regular basis, you are creating Wheel of Time conversation and content. So, find the place where you like to do that best and have zero expectations that anyone else will care about you. And what I mean by that is care about the thing you're doing. Like, if you are going to create a live call and talk show, don't assume people are going to show up, because you'll be pleasantly surprised all the time. Like, when people show up to my show, even now, I'm like, oh, that was really nice of them. Like, I don't like, where are my people? I expect them to be here, so, and I would highly recommend picking something that isn't something that everyone else is doing. But if that's the thing you can't not do it. But if you're like, I want to try something that's unique to me and how I fan, go find something that's really unique. You might be surprised. It's like when I started like a theory site that was solely dedicated to it, I was shocked that there were a couple people out there that were like me, and they stuck around. So you'll be shocked that the unique thing that might make you happy about the Wheel of Time and doing something with it, whether or not it's making Legos or whatever, that might be the thing that this small group of people might show up. They might not, and it just might be you actually talking into the world. But guess what? That's okay too. Zero expectations, and be unique, and make sure you're doing it because you can't not do it. I think that's all keys to success.
Okay, we've got two more questions, and the last one is a perfect one to end on as well. So this one is by Blinded Fool. It's more, I think, directed at Matt, but everyone else chime in if you can think of something. Is there a rumor or theory, whether it was correct or not, that you enjoyed, but most people probably have never heard of? So maybe something that's completely bizarre. I know you used to do the bizarre panels of like the most bizarre theories.
So, like, is there a unique idea that just I like? Or say that again. So ask that.
Yeah. So is the basically did the theory come across you that was so kind of unique that never really got traction, but you really enjoyed and maybe wanted it to be true, or never quite turned out to be true?
That's like naming most of my theories. So yeah, I will use one of mine from this just because I'm more familiar with it, and we're running out of time. So I'll give you this one. I still believe. So I'm still wanting this to be true. I always believed that Lanfear set herself up first, the Seanchan, before moving away from them. Like, she was part of them and working that angle before she let that angle kind of go. And that there's a lot of proof in the second and third book that she was there in my mind. But I always liked the idea that Lanfear was trying to have a counter, like she was looking for like who she could use, but in a larger sense in the world to make kind of be her, that she was manipulating, and then she moved on from that. So yeah, Lanfear with the Seanchan was always an idea that people always thought was kind of crazy and loony, but I loved it.
Yeah, I like it.
I like it.
My one is still Demandred. That's always Temandred. That is still always. I will die on that hill, and I would love to see them merged in the TV show as well. Like, I'd just be like, just do it. Yeah. So, final question, and thank you so much for coming on and doing this. I've had loads of fun. I know that everyone watching has had loads of fun as well. The chat has been hopping on YouTube and on the webinar. So I love this question, and hopefully we can have a good few minutes just talk about it before we all have to go. But Lumen on YouTube wants to know, how did Rand light the pipe?
By the way, are you like spoilers here? Is that
spoilers? Yeah. But to be fair, if people haven't read the last book, they'll be like, "What are they talking about?"
Yeah, I don't understand what you're talking
about. I mean, I have answers, of course, but I don't want to jump in here. You two feel free to jump in.
You go ahead, Matt. You have the answers.
So I love my good friend from Theoryland's answer to this. She's like, stop overcomplicating it. It's a Terran Grail. And I just love that. I love that because it totally takes out all of the like, what could it be? And how could he be doing this? And the entire time Rand just like, it has a Terran Grail. And it's just like a funny way to address that. So that's my contribution to this discussion.
All right. Well, before we have to go, I will just add, I always thought of it as he can now alter reality to some extent by thinking about it the way you can in Teleron Riyadh. And he has this ability now. How he has that ability is another metaphysical thing that you could get all tangled up in, but that's kind of how I think of it.
Yes, that's exactly what I thought pretty much the whole time. But I'll take it a little bit of a step further, and it was because he's already stepped outside the pattern. So he's seen the pattern. He's seen how it could be. It was shaped. He did things with the Dark One. I mean, I know we're saying spoilers, but I went to the last battle. But because of that, I think of it as layers. So there's Teleron Rioid, and then there's the real world, and then there's the real world. And then there's outside the pattern, and that's how I always thought of it. And he just is part of the pattern now, and he can do. He's seen it because he's seen outside the pattern, so he understands how it works. But I'm wrong. almost all of the time. Matt can attest to that. So can Rebecca. So
I'm one of these people. Whenever
We've
I
all been
see,
wrong a few times.
yeah, I'm one of these
That's
people. Whenever
true.
I see a theory on the pipe, I'm always like, yes, that sounds right. And then I see another theory on the pipe, and I'm like, that also sounds right.
And I'm sorry,
I-
David, that I
all
have
of
to
them.
go. I'm sorry that
Yeah.
I have to go soon, but
Yeah.
Yeah, well, we're just going to wrap this thing
Oh,
up. now.
cool, yeah.
I'm just happy that that is the unanswered question, though. I think
yeah,
it's great. There's
Yeah.
no answer to it. But well, there was an answer for it, but we'll never know what that is.
yeah, it's good to have those.
Yeah, excellent. Okay, well, we are sadly out of time. We could do this for, unless we all didn't have to go and we had lives. We could do this all the time. We could just talk about Wheel of Time forever. So thank you to everyone for coming on to doing this with me. It's been a great night. Really, really enjoyed it. Thanks to Rebecca, to Matt and John for taking part. Thanks to Pam, who's been a wonderful tech, making sure everything's been going smoothly, and everyone who's watched in the webinar and on YouTube for all of your questions. We try to get to as many as we can. What I might do is I might just, any questions we didn't get to, I'll put them together and we can get a few answers from, we can just tweet them out or something, that we could maybe do that for everyone, because there was quite a lot of questions. If Pam, if you would just put the link to our Glasgow store in there as well, because obviously we are counting, this is all for WorldCon in 2024, which is happening in Glasgow. We have lots of events coming up. We have a Redbubble store of merchandise. We also are at the next big event, which is happening, big convention in the UK, which is EasterCon, which is going to be in Birmingham Hilton Metropole over the weekend, beginning from April 7th, 2023. We'll have a table there. And for Glasgow 2024, we have a few upcoming events planned on the YouTube channel and on the webinar. Our next one is our special holiday event, Always Winter and Never Christmas, which is on the December 20th. And after that, we have a roundtable discussion on January 18th, 2023, which I'm hosting that one as well, on neurodiversity in science fiction and fantasy. You can get tickets to that now on Eventbrite for joining the webinar, or you can hit a reminder on YouTube so that one comes up. Please keep an eye out on our social medias for all of the announcements for everything that's coming on. And if you have enjoyed this event, and you would like to help out with Glasgow 2024, we are always looking for volunteers and enthusiastic people from all kinds of backgrounds, and whatever you can do as a fan or as a creator or anything like that. If you want to help us out, let us know. Again, thank you very much from me and from everyone on the panels, and that is us now. So thank you very much, and we'll see you all again.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye. That was the awkward sit here until we know it's over.
And